Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to and happy Earth Day to everybody. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara's forum on our climate emergency, nature-based adaptation solutions. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you please make me an attendee?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think Allegra can do that too.
I can try, yes.
I did. Okay. I've done it. Is that good, Iris?
Yes, she's gone.
All right. Okay, so let's get started. Okay. So this is the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara's forum on our climate emergency, nature-based adaptation solutions, and you're at the right place if that's what you want to learn about. I'm Vijaya Jamalamarika. I'm president of our Santa Barbara League. We will be having simultaneous Spanish interpretation, and it's being provided by Sylvia Uribe of Transil Pro. And I will now ask her to please give us instructions in Spanish on how to access it, to announce how you can go to the Spanish channel.
Sylvia. Good afternoon. Thank you, Vijaya. ¿Qué tal, amigos? Este es el foro de la Liga de Mujeres Votantes y por favor, si ustedes están interesados en tener la interpretación al español, en la parte de abajo hay un globito, como un mundito. La tienen que, en cuanto yo termine de hablar, se esperan un minutito y va a aparecer ahí y van a tener que elegir la función de español. Y una vez que la vean en su pantalla, nada más hagan clic en la función de español y toda la información que esté pasando en inglés, con mucho gusto la voy a interpretar al español. If anybody who speaks English wants to hear the Spanish interpretation, please do so by clicking the Spanish button. Well, first by clicking the globe button and then choosing the Spanish version. Thank you very much. Gracias a todos.
Thank you, Sylvia. Before we start, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that the land that we're on is the unceded territory of the Chumash people of Santa Barbara. We pay our respects to our Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place their home. The League of Women Voters thanks the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. The League of Women Voters is over 100 years old, 101 actually. We are an all-volunteer 501c3 nonprofit. Geographically, we cover the south coast of Santa Barbara County only. We have a sister league in the Santa Maria Valley. The league's mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. We work to see a democracy where every person in our community has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. We are political, but non-partisan. We don't support or oppose candidates running for office. Today, we are honored to partner with our sister organization, Community Environmental Council, as we celebrate the last day of the 2021 virtual Earth Day Festival. This forum is also being live streamed on Facebook on our league site. All questions and comments should be typed into the Q&A box, which will be monitored by our moderator, Allegra Roth. A big thank you to our league climate action team led by Kathy King, who is a member of the league, for organizing this forum. A warm welcome to moderator Allegra Roth and our distinguished speakers. Allegra is the Food and Climate Program Manager at the Community Environmental Council. She works with farmers, and ranchers in our region to advance healthy soils practices and pushes for supportive policies and incentives to scale innovative land-based climate solutions. Before joining CEC, she worked in water and environmental policy for the California State Legislature, both in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties, and as a legislative aide in the California State Capitol. So now, please welcome our moderator, Allegra Roth.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Vijaya, and thank you to our panelists. It's great to have everyone here on this wild Earth Day weekend. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for partnering on this forum. I love talking about these topics, and I'm really grateful to be able to talk about it with our panelists today. So this is going to be an interesting forum. I'm really thrilled to talk with all of you and our panelists about our climate emergency and the ways we can steward our natural systems to remedy the crisis we are in. We'll be talking about the human relationship with the natural world, our soil, water, plants, the life beneath our feet, and ways that that relationship isn't working, how it could be better, and ways that we can repair it. So just to set a little context here, the idea of regenerative and restorative agriculture has gotten a lot of attention over the last few years. There's a lot of interesting buzz and discussion around how certain farming practices can draw down carbon from the atmosphere and prevent climate change impacts. And there are dozens of strategies that we know, if scaled, could sequester tremendous amounts of carbon. I've seen the number of up to 25 million metric tons of carbon annually just by changing the way we manage land. And that's for the state of California. And that would be about a fifth of the negative emissions, so the carbon drawdown that we would need as a state to get to carbon neutrality. So as we know, though, carbon sequestration is just one part of the larger complex environmental puzzle that we are trying to solve. We've learned that humans play an important role in our ecosystems and are an integral part of and not separate from our regional ecological cycles. So when we eat food or run the tap, those are small examples of being in relationship to each other and the planet. And I think we all know that we can improve that relationship. We can do better, and we need to do better as climate change impacts increase, to support the soil life beneath our feet, to support our Earth's ability to cycle water and nutrients, to improve our lands and waters' cultivation of diverse species, and our Earth's ability to grow nutritious and sustainable food sources. So all of that is what we're going to talk about today. Before I let our panelists introduce themselves, I want to acknowledge that much of our understanding of land stewardship and ecology-based food production is grounded in indigenous and traditional ecological knowledge. So though some of the strategies might be new, many of the principles that we'll talk about today are not new. And in our region, we have the Chumash peoples to thank for sharing that knowledge and keeping it alive. And we will keep learning and keep adapting and building new knowledge as the climate changes. So we have brought together a stellar panel of folks who can speak to our regional communities' connection to our natural cycles. So we'll get the panelists introduced, then we'll go into discussion and have time for Q&A at the end. So yeah, let's start getting our panelists introduced. Julie Tumamite, why don't we get started with you?
Good afternoon, Haku, Lahupwashwashets. How are you today? My name is Julie Tumamite Stensley. I'm here in my home in the Ojai Valley, which is where I grew up, down in the river bottom. I'm the youngest of 7, 3 brothers and 3 sisters. And through the journey of where I am today takes me back to that river. How many of you know your watershed and where you live nearest to? And who are the indigenous people in your communities? It's been a real mystery for so many decades for people, because there are so few of us who are out here in the world talking and sharing and being present and being of service when asked. My ancestry on the Chumash side comes from my father, Vincent Tumamayat. Both his parents were Chumash. My mother's from Guanajuato, Mexico. And as we grew up in this river bottom, little did I know that I was playing in the same waters and walking the same land as my great-great-grandmother, Alula Mewe. Maria Ricarda was her baptismal name, here at the village of Matilha, which is just up the highway from us. So our ancestry, our genealogy goes through so many villages throughout our territory. And following in the footsteps of my father as he became Paha, which is a ceremonial leader here in the Ojai Valley, at his passing in 1992, I took responsibility. I was given the responsibility. I became an elder at the age of 37. And with that became a lot of challenges that we didn't know, political wise, environmental issues, even our language and certain customs. We just weren't taught those things. So spending a lot of my time learning and listening to those few people, less than a dozen people who were interviewed by anthropologists doing archaeology I do many things. I am right now currently the tribal chair of the Barbareño Ventureño Band of Mission Indians. I will be getting off of that this year. After 20 years, I'm done. But I will still be in contact with my families and tribes and still doing all the things that I love to do. I educate in the school systems, from the little tiny crisscross applesauce preschoolers all the way up to university level. Right now, I am currently on the Native American Heritage Commission as a commissioner. That is a commission that helps intervene and be mediators for the protection of sacred sites and burial sites. And there are 9 of us, currently 7, on this commission from all over Native peoples throughout California. I am also on the Santa Clara River Conservancy. So I'm advisors to a few other groups, but not full time. It's a lot of work. As a tribal chair, we consult and I do cultural resource management. So a lot of that work has taken us to many places of our territory. Our tribe through the Thomas and Woolsey fires, we engaged with the federal government in that cleanup process. And having that type of exposure to our region in going into private lands where there's always locked gates, no trespassing, when those gates and roads were burnt open, we had access to some of our most beautiful, inaccessible places that none of us have ever seen, even for almost a generation. So the work I do, to me, is more, I shouldn't call it work, it's a responsibility. It is something that I have chosen to do. Nothing's ever the same. I'm always moving in such a different fashion, and I am honored to do that. I am blessed with those opportunities to be present for people. So with that, I thank you, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Julie. All right, Mike, take it away. Tell us about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike. I'm a farmer with McGrath Family Farm in Camarillo, California. We're right off the 101 in Central. And I didn't start my life, I wasn't born into a farming family. I had been born and raised in Oxnard, but for some reason it escaped me. I never paid attention to all the food that was grown here, how it was grown, the people that were doing that work. Instead, I had a career in sports gambling from a very young age until I started having health issues and existential crisis about 10 years ago. And we all hear we should be eating a little bit healthier, a little more organic, a little more fruits and vegetables. And in that direction, I started shopping at a little roadside market here at the ranch. and I met Phil McGrath. And Phil, who didn't know me at all, took the time to, I would shop and he would walk me into the fields, spring day, just like today. And I could remember we had strawberries on one side of the path, and on the other side were vegetables I didn't know what they were yet, Romanesco and types of cauliflower and other strange things that he was growing. And he was so passionate. Phil was so clear on who he was as a farmer, and he would slam his fist down and say, we need more farmers. He said all of our ancestors knew how to grow their own food. He said today that number is less than 1%. You have 1% feeding the other 99%. He talked about organic agriculture. He said we need to get synthetic chemicals out of our food production. He talked about local and regional distribution of food. He said in an ag community like Ventura County today, 90% of what's grown here is shipped out of the county. Out of that 90%, 70% is leaving the country. And we're importing in cheap food. But Phil always said the food was not cheap. It had a cost, and it was on the backs of the environment and those that are doing the work to grow that food for us. So I thought with my crisis of career and my health issues, I said, well, this is something I can sink my teeth into. This is something that affects every human being. We all need to eat. We all need access to clean water and clean air. And I know now, not only human life, but all life, from microbiology to all the critters and the birds, and all are affected by our agricultural practices. So my farming career began in earnest then. Today, fast forward, many twists and turns along the way. We're now a collective of farmers called the McGrath Family Farmers under Phil's mentorship. And this is his succession plan, is to empower as many who are willing and capable to participate in the growing of food. So we have a three-part mission today. Number one is to grow farmers. We want to help as many people that are interested and able to participate in the growing of their own food for themselves, for their communities. Number two is what we call as regenerative agriculture. Phil gave us organic practices, and essentially that means we've removed the synthetic chemicals from the equation, but soil and environmental scientists were telling us even when we till, we're causing environmental impact. Some of our other practices, it seemed like a net neutral, and now we want to see if we can grow food in a way that actually measurably improves the environment and also empowers those on and around that farm. Is education based, so we're always learning and teaching others, and also is economically viable so farmers can make a living wage. And finally, that local and regional food piece. So in that area, we have, of course, our produce is in schools, and we have kids on the farm and other entities, hospitals and places like this. But we also have a fully customized delivered farm box called Farmivore that we're really proud of by us and other community members to really lower the barrier to entry into getting food into our communities. And also in that area, partnered with Food Forward and Food Share, our food rescue and food banks, to make sure that all have access. So that I'll leave it there for my intro. I'm happy to be here with everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Sounds like you're doing a lot.
We're trying.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's go over to Minnie.
Hi, Allegra. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm really honored to be included in this discussion amongst all these other wonderful panelists. My name is Minnie Ringland. I am a master's student at the UCSD Bren School of Environmental Science and Management. And our 2-year degree program there involves a year-long capstone project. So my team has been working for the last year with the County of Santa Barbara, their sustainability division, to evaluate the climate mitigation potential of natural and working lands in the area through emissions reductions and carbon storage. And what we've been focusing on is a lot of the regenerative practices that Mike just mentioned. My personal experience with this topic is fairly new. I've always been interested in food systems from a health and justice perspective. My background is in biology, but the climate component of this is sort of new. So I'll just say that one of the most rewarding parts of our project over the last year has been the conversations that we've been able to have with local agricultural stakeholders. And that really informed all the work we did. And so I'm really excited to continue that conversation here today.
Thanks, Minnie. Looking forward to hearing more about your research. All right, Blake.
Thank you. Good afternoon and happy Earth Day celebration to everyone. Never has there been a more important moment in history, I think, of humanity to acknowledge the tremendous impact that we have on this planet and the huge opportunity to live more closely aligned with our natural systems. My name is Blake Stock, and I have two roles that are worthy of note. First, I'm the president of the board of directors of the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition, which is a local advocacy and education organization dedicated to the marvelously simple yet elegant bicycle. And my second role, which is more related to why I'm speaking here today, is that I lead the seafood program at Fairtrade USA. Fairtrade USA is a nonprofit organization and the leading certifier of fair trade products in North America. And our seal, which you can see there in the top right-hand corner of the screen, that seal on a product signifies that the product was made according to rigorous fair trade standards that promote sustainable livelihoods, safe working conditions, protections of the environment, and strong, transparent supply chains. So thank you all for having me. I'm really happy to be here and excited to share a little bit of information about what we do.
Thank you, Blake. All right. So let's get into some questions here. So I wanted to start by asking Julie to give us some background on kind of the diversity of climate and land types in our region, and kind of dive into the long and interesting history of Indigenous management here. So Julia, could you start by just giving us a little background on the history of ecological land stewardship in our region?
There we go. Boy, when you started there, Allegra, I thought, I don't have all that in 5 minutes. We need it. We need hours.
Yes, correct.
So let me see. Okay, so I wanted to start with that the stewardship and the tending of our environment is a relationship that people have disconnected from. Our people were completely reliant on what nature had, and it was by trial and error that they learned how to exist and be a part of and not greater than the environment. It was season to season, year to year, generation to generation of the knowledge handed down. What was needed? People who specialized in specific gifts. In regards to the outer worlds, the multiverse, not the universe, but the multiverse. And there was this relationship with those other universes that were malevolent or benevolent, depending on how we as humans interacted with those beings. And that was part of the mystery, and where we want today those answers, like, right away, or, just it's, I believe for us that having that bit and touch of mystery is what keeps us walking in a really, conscious way. When we don't care about those things, I'll get a little into that, but the need to understand the sacred and how to honor, respect, and give back to each and every animal, plant, elemental, through what is the source, through songs, through stories, dance, ritual giving, and that reciprocity of how this earth sustained us for these, by scientific terms, our earliest known human here in this region of North America came from our island, Santa Rosa, 13,500 years. So when I say this is my homeland, I really mean it. that sustainability, that what people that are here now that have left their places of origin, we've never left. Those elders that, like I said, that handful of people who spoke about that, the wet life ways, it's sad when you think about it. It's all of our history is wrapped up around the voices of less than a half a dozen people, or less than a dozen people. And that was through because of the mission period. And what we're facing right now with the COVID, that's nothing new. It nearly, those diseases that came in through that time period nearly wiped out 90% of our population. We survived just by the grace of God, with no vaccines, no medicines, just by sheer strength and prayer. We needed people such as the weather doctor. That was the person who observed, who watched the natural world and what animals and plants were doing. We knew in one of those universes that there was significant activity up in our upper world that are represented in our cave paintings. That the in conjunction with the weather doctor was the datura, the mamoi, the Jemson. That there was a specialized doctor there who helped these people with visions, with communications, with that supernatural communication that needed to happen, because a lot of that depended on those answers. For instance, in the upper world, the sky people played a gambling game that lasted all year long. And at the winter solstice, which we lived on a calendar year and seasonal, during that time of winter solstice, the score was looked for, who won the game up there, because our ante was either rain or human lives. And depending on who won that game, if you were a good doctor, weather doctor at predicting that, you could predict to your people, hey, it's going to be a great year. We don't need to worry about it. Rain is coming. I have kind of looked at myself into that in one regards, and that's to the oaks, the oak trees and their acorns. And I look at the abundance, the time of when acorns dropped on the ground. And I actually had some confirmation on that one. A man I know from Fish and Wildlife says, you've been right 8 years in a row of your predictions. So again, it's watching what's going on, and these animals and trees and all living beings here have millions of years of memory. They have so much knowledge, way more than we will ever be able to comprehend. And so that relationship that all indigenous peoples, including you, where you were in those indigenous practices, all had that communication, all had that relationship. You had smoke doctors, which helped the young ones come through and out of that into that puberty stage of life. The women, young girls, all had that naturally with their moon cycles, but the boys, they needed a little help. So there were rituals to kind of help get them into preparation. But in the meantime, the young children were part of that tending of nature. They were always there with, if they weren't with the mothers, they were with the aunties or with Nini, grandmother. So it was all part of a community that learned to tend the wild. In our environment, even today, we have so few things that have just gone, are not extinct. I mean, they're just very few, the abalone and some species of plants. But we can look around in our environment today, and we can still see and enjoy and learn about the abundance of the food and animals that are here. It's just that we as humans have become selfish, we've become greedy. I've been doing a lot of talks lately on, and I love seeing them in the schools and in cities, the native gardens. And in your homes, we're doing some sustainability to plant and get native plants in your homes, plant, there's a lot of things. I'll wait till the second question to get more into that. But we needed strong leaders. We needed these leaders who made sure that with the abundance of all this food, that everybody helped one another out. That if you were home ill, or if you were home ready to give birth, if you were elderly, that no matter what was in season, you got enough to supply everybody in the village food and whatever, because we were seasonal. We were not agriculturalists. One way to find out about the abundance of our foods is to drive the old highways. Right now, you're seeing elderberry blooming on both sides of the highways and old roads, because as the people moved about and walked, because we had no mode of transportation to get from one place to the other. And I'm talking about from the mountains. Our territory is 7,000 square miles of territory, including 4 Channel Islands. That's enormous. So you have an abundance of food, so that as people went from coastal, island, mainland, interior, and mountains, collecting food such as the pinon pine, way up in the Cuyama Valley, and then trading with the people on the islands, our highways are those trade networks. So as you walk along the drive, now we're driving down these old highways, you see there's plants for food, medicine, tools, offerings for prayer. It's all there, because as they ate, seeds were left, seeds were thrown down, so that the next season, there's that plant I've been craving over there. Now it's here. It's going to be on my path now every time I walk to go visit relatives or go up to that sacred mountain. Our closest sacred mountain, besides our ones here in Ojai, Sisa, Sisar, we say today, Sistoptopo, the Topa-Topas, is, and we don't have a name for it, Taylor Ranch. That's our winter solstice, right up there at that intersection of 33-101. People from all over went to that mountain to pray in the winter time. There are, with the abundance of people here and the lack of our native landscapes, which has been taken out by ranching, by farming, by orchards, by logging, all of that, we've lost a lot of our landscape. That the principles that have always were important, even before everybody came out here, were very simple. Was that you don't take the first of a plant, and you don't take the last. If that's all there is, you leave it. You do without. But you only take what you need, and you use all of it. And that's part of the reciprocity to the plant, to be respectful to it. There's elders who spoke of treating plants or rooted people as a relative, that relationship was that tender and that giving and that loving, that it was necessary. Everything had a soul, a spirit, and a life, that it took breath, or it gave us breath. When we do our studies with the oak trees with the children, we play this little game. There are breathing buddies, and so we teach them that exchange, that we give our rooted people and they give us back in return. So it's that type of relationship that we have lost over the generations, that as Indigenous peoples, we've been forced out of our lands and forced out of our culture. So to try to remember and to reconnect, some of it we learn through the archaeological work I do. And it's really important that I wish we didn't have to. I wish we could just leave the archaeology in the ground. But again, it's essential for a lot of things. So it's, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I think, on the second round of questions, I really want to get into some of those principles that you started mentioning. But let's give some time. I want to hear from Mike.
Yes, absolutely.
And then,
thank you for keeping me on time.
That's okay. Let's circle back to you, Julie. Thanks so much.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So Mike, you work as a farmer in Ventura County, and you seem to have found a pretty unique balance of food production and tending the land, improving soil health, like you were mentioning. Tell us what you've learned from your experience. How can our agricultural and natural lands build climate resilience and help mitigate the climate impacts that we're already seeing?
I think me coming as an outsider into modern day agriculture, production-based agriculture, industrial agriculture in Ventura County, the neighbor to you all there in Santa Barbara, we're 100,000 irrigated acres of farmland. Of that 100,000 acres, over 90% is in conventional agricultural practices. And I think for me as an outsider, obviously Phil was preaching organic. Even still, it's very, we're using tillage, we're using large machinery, we're doing the proper rotations and cover crops and these kinds of things. But I wondered to myself in the fields when I was working, is there a way to grow food that can improve the environment, that can leave things better than we found it? And I even thought about the economics. I thought what I didn't know, and maybe a lot of people don't know, farmers are not municipal workers. They're not like a law enforcement or a firefighter or a judge or teacher. There's no salary. So these farmers are self-employed business owners, and it's the riskiest business you can think of. And that's what I came from, a background of analyzing risk and numbers, and it was off the charts. Just the amount of risk you have to take to acquire land or lease land or access land, and then you pay all your costs are up front: seed, water, labor, hands to help, mechanization, post-harvest facilities, and your whole way, especially when you're farming organic or better, you're farming, you're working with nature, right? So the natural systems are in play. What we call is pest pressure, weed pressure, weather fluctuations, and market fluctuations, all these kinds of variables. And I thought to myself, so, well, if I wanted to get into farming, my last name's not McGrath. I don't come from a farming legacy. How would I access farming? And if I wanted to farm in a way that actually improved the environment and empowered those on and around that farm, and had a shot at an economic, making a living wage for these farmers, and also tied in education, of course, ongoing education for the farmers and sharing that with the community. And this is when I started looking at historical models. And I started looking at amazing Japanese style of agriculture and some of the French gardening systems. And for sure, looked into the Chumash and how the Chumash tended these lands. And I tried to learn as much as I could from our ancestors and, hunter-gatherers, farmers. Later on, it became farming and ranching, and tried to tie those all in together into a production-based system that could help going forward. So I think we have to understand what farming is currently, for better or worse, that it's, and at least here and all over California, probably nationally and globally, this is the style of agriculture that's happening. There are small farms, there are those tending the land in such a wonderful way. However, the majority of production is this way. So what I look at it is understanding how farming works, the mechanics of it, the economics of it. This is why so few farmers, because you invest in an education, you invest in a career, and why would you take on that level of risk? So all of our, some of our best and brightest, they're going into careers off the land. Farmers are telling them, leave the farm, go do something else. We need more of our, current generation and coming generation to consider careers in and around systems of agriculture that we would call as regenerative, where it's measurably improving along those ways. So I think understanding current practices, working with current farmers, meeting them where they are, I see regenerative as a direction, not as a hard, solid way of being. It's, if you're here, can you take a step forward? Can you take another step forward? Can you keep moving and in a measurably, in a way that's measurably improving these things that we care so much about, environment, and not only human life, but soil microbiology and all the life around. So this has been an experiment at McGrath under Phil's mentorship, where we started a 1 acre plot called Baby Root Farm, and it incorporated California native plants. Julie, I think you'd be I think you'd really enjoy to see. It's out of the 1 acre, you have a large majority of it is covered in California natives, very small grow beds. That's the economic driver, quick growing crops that we're able to regenerate ourselves economically, and lots of room for education. And we just are now scaling. I'm on a 20-acre parcel, so we have big baby root farm now. Because to talk to these farmers around here, they're not going to listen to me at that 1 acre scale. They need to see that this is a viable model. So we're trying to take those practices, see if we can move them to 20 acres and begin that dialogue of, hey, this works. This is something that maybe you can begin to incorporate some of these practices in. And we want to be as open as possible, as transparent as possible with sharing what works and what doesn't work. I could probably keep going, but I'll stop it. I'm sure my time is coming to an end there. So hopefully that was helpful.
That's perfect. And yeah, we'll talk in a little bit about kind of the challenges to scaling and really advancing this at a scale that can make impacts on the climate. But that's a really great story. So I guess, Minnie, I want to zoom in specifically on carbon. So your team at the Brent School has done some interesting research on the amount of carbon our lands can theoretically store. So could you share a bit more about your research and explain to what extent our region's lands can improve the carbon cycle?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'll probably end up building a lot on what Mike is saying about these regenerative practices. Our research is cool because it kind of, beyond all the benefits that farmers can experience for themselves implementing these practices, we kind of validate a lot of those practices on a more global scale. So in terms of addressing the problem of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. So we know that natural and working lands in the county, which include forests, grassland, shrubland, and farmland, these serve as really important carbon sinks, which are systems that absorb more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere than they release. And as with any terrestrial ecosystem, carbon is incorporated into our soil and plant biomass from carbon dioxide in the air through photosynthesis. And some of that carbon will eventually enter the soil as organic matter decomposes. And the amount of carbon that can be stored in soil is dependent on the local climate, the soil type and composition, and particularly in the case of agricultural land, what activities are taking place. So it's been shown that when carefully managed, soil can actually store up to 3 times more carbon than the atmosphere. And in our work, we found that over 85% of county land is contained or represented by these natural and working lands. And our calculations estimate that over 51 million metric tons of carbon stock are present on these lands. So this is really significant when we're thinking about addressing climate change. At the same time, agriculture and agricultural lands can emit greenhouse gases. For example, through the application of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer or livestock production leading to methane emissions. And forest clearing and loss can also release a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. So we think it's really important to improve the ability of these lands to store carbon, as well as limit the activities that emit greenhouse gases. And this will ensure that our agricultural lands can act as actual assets in terms of addressing climate change rather than liabilities. And as Mike mentioned, it's fairly well established that certain management practices can be used to restore soils and increase their ability to uptake carbon. And something that I just want to note here that is often left out of the kind of academic side of the conversation is that these practices really draw upon longstanding traditional knowledge and techniques, which I'm sure Julie would be able to tell us more about. So our project specifically developed a baseline carbon inventory or accounting for all the carbon stocks contained on these lands. And then we used historical trends to project how this will change in the future. And then we modeled how the implementation of some of these climate smart management practices, as they're often referred to, this includes things like composting, reduced till, hedgerow planting, how these can improve carbon storage. The scenarios that we tested out were intended to represent a broad range of what's possible, more than any kind of prescriptive recommendation. But we found that some practices can sequester the equivalent of an emissions reduction achieved by taking 46,000 cars off the road for 1 year, which is pretty cool. And then beyond storing carbon, natural and working lands provide really important ecosystem and social services to the county. They supply water to residents, support biodiversity, contribute to clean air and water, and they support the region economically. So for all these reasons, we are finding it really important to invest in programs that not only protect the county's lands from being degraded or transformed to other uses, and also protect them from climate threats like wildfire and drought. And as Mike mentioned, there are a lot of costs and technical barriers associated with transitioning to these practices. So we are recommending that the county take steps to kind of address these barriers for farmers and ranchers, and just generally provide more support to land managers responsible for working these really important lands.
Great, thanks, Minnie. And it's really exciting to hear that the county's, hearing recommendations from your team and considering them, and it could have real impact for our climate planning at a regional scale. So let's go to you, Blake. You have a really interesting history in sustainable aquaculture and marine systems. I'd like to hear you talk about the role that our ocean and our marine systems can play in improving climate change resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. To me, Earth Day is a celebration of our home. It's our caretaker. And I think it's important to remember that over 70% of this beautiful planet is water, and the vast majority of that is ocean. And so being good stewards of our oceans is protecting Mother Earth, and fair trade has long been a driver of sustainable livelihoods, social responsibility, and community development through the application of our robust and credible social economic standards that support farms, fisheries, and factories in transition towards improved social welfare and environmental sustainability. And so fair trade's experience in the seafood industry began in 2014 when it developed and implemented our capture fisheries standard that leverages fair trade certification to address these social, environmental, economic issues within the fishing industry while improving traceability throughout supply chains. And it gives retailers a more holistic choice when selecting and sourcing responsible seafood. So when I hear the term climate change resilience, one of the first things that comes to my mind is food and livelihood security. And over 250 million people globally are directly employed in the seafood sector, and hundreds of millions, if not billions of people around the world rely on seafood for their protein needs. And with the global population set to reach 10 billion by 2050, the need to harness our natural resources responsibly is more urgent than ever. Sustainable fishing has a vital role to play in securing those resources. So global demand for seafood has doubled since the 1960s, and appetite for fish has outpaced what we can sustainably catch. More than 80% of the world's fish stocks have collapsed or unable to withstand more fishing. A key to ensuring responsible harvesting and production of seafood are strong regulatory regimes, incredible, verifiable, science-based certification schemes like MSC, ASC, BAP, and of course, fair trade. But to feed this growing and hungry population, we need a diverse supply portfolio to create resiliency. And aquaculture has emerged as an alternative to shift from capture to culture. Aquaculture is the fastest growing segment of food production globally. The industry is worth $160 billion and accounts for roughly half of the world's fish consumption. The US imports nearly 80% of its seafood, much of which is farmed, and it often comes from China, which is by far the world's largest producer. Aquaculture has existed for centuries, since the dawn of humanity. actually, and there are some clear environmental benefits over catching fish in the wild. It reduces the problem of bycatch. Thousands of tons of fish are thrown away every year because they are quote unquote unwanted. They were not the primary target species. Farming bivalves, things like oysters, mussels, clams, are a cheaper form of protein, while they're also, they have restorative effects on the environment. They remove excess nutrients, things like phosphorus, nitrogen, and act as carbon sinks for the environment. Seaweed in particular is a huge carbon sink and can play a really critical role in restorative and regenerative aquaculture. In India and China and other parts of Asia, farms have become a crucial source of jobs, especially for women. Aquaculture makes it easier for wholesalers to ensure their purchases aren't inadvertently supporting illegal fishing, forms of environmental crimes, or forced labor. And there are potential environmental benefits as well, right? Aquaculture uses less water and arable land than other forms of protein production. And CO2 emissions produced per pound of fish are a quarter of that produced by beef and 2/3 that produced per pound of pork. But it's not all rosy. There are definitely hidden costs. Highly concentrated animal production of any kind, whether it be beef, pork, or fish, can produce a lot of waste. And if farmed in shallow and relatively sedentary conditions, this waste can build up on the seafloor, smothering other plant and animal habitats. Nitrogen and phosphorus levels can spike in surrounding waters, and farm fish can escape, threatening native species. But these drawbacks aside, leading environmental groups have embraced the idea that cultured seafood can help feed the planet's growing population and the growing demand for animal protein. The Nature Conservancy issued a report that stated by 2050, cultured fish should be our primary source of seafood. This industry is necessary to ensuring food and livelihood security, so we need to make sure that it's done correctly through rigorous oversight and improved technologies. But I think most importantly, and this kind of gets to what Mike was saying, we need to be willing to pay the true cost of food because responsibly produced food takes into account and consideration all of those negative externalities. And you know, I think it's important to note that cheap food that's $4.99, all you can eat shrimp, has a cost to someone somewhere. And in the end, we all pay for that. So it's important for us to recognize that and be willing to pay for responsibly, sustainably produced food.
Thanks, Blake. Yeah, I really appreciate kind of the culture versus catch analogy, and yeah, the externalities of all these things that we take advantage of and we don't see. So we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to go back to Mike and just ask a little bit more about the challenges to scale. So you talked about, you know, starting with 1 acre, really looking to scale up to 20 acres. And I'm sure other people are thinking about scale as well. What are the challenges you hear about, and what are the opportunities to move forward with scaling in an equitable and meaningful way?
The challenges, there's many challenges, of course. The economics, as I mentioned, to be able to scale like that, you're going to have to access capital. For us, it's borrowed or, you know, from banks, private investors. We're a for-profit farm. So accessing the capital, and then, you know, it's a significant risk. Systems, provable models, right? There's not a lot of provable models that are actively trying to transition production-based agriculture towards environmentally regenerative, measurably regenerative practices. We have Rodell Institute on site here. So it's one of the premier organic research institutes in the world. And we're hoping that they can begin to quantify that this is in fact having a positive impact, and things that are not, we want to know so we can steer in that direction. I think provable models, I know we're running out of time, provable models, resources, support coming from all areas, private business, our local, state, federal and beyond, just steering resources and us as consumers being functionally selfish and wanting the best for ourselves, those we care about, healthy, nutritious food for ourselves and our communities, and be willing to value exchange, pay an appropriate price for those goods and those environmental practices will go a long way towards moving this forward. So provable models and resources and capable, committed people in the space would, I would say, are the challenges that we have.
Got it. So Julie, you started touching a little bit on the core principal values that you see as part of ecological land stewardship. Could you briefly just share the high level values that you hold in the work you do and that you think is inherent for all of us to keep doing this work?
Julia, I think you're on mute.
We really do need to learn about what was California, this region, like before. There's so much, as I said, abundance of what is here, and every single being is contributing to that protection, that interaction, and chain, which is necessary. And so what we're seeing right now is that people are living in fear of rodents, for instance. So what do? You put poison out, and then you kill the hawks, the coyotes. You know, they are beneficial to all those. So if we're going to get rid of all those animals, then it's going to have to be people who are going to have to start watching and watching over everything that we're doing here in this world. We need every single being here. This relationship that Michael was talking about, in incorporating that landscape of native plants within the farming community is excellent to do. Bringing back in and restoring our wetlands. Then you have viable plants that are not only filtering water, that become also viable habitats for our native reptiles and amphibians. You have to restore our oak groves, so that will suck up the carbon. Look at how we're building. I mean, everything that we had when people came into California and into parts of these regions, Yosemite, John Muir, oh, no one has ever stepped foot on this land. Well, no colonizer has stepped on this land. Native peoples knew how to leave no footprint, basically. And so to step back, I don't think we have gone a far way in destroying a lot of our environment with our byproducts of what we're trying to do. Right now, the people are looking at the idea of putting the wind turbines in our ocean. I don't like that idea. Let's talk about pulling the plug a little bit more, but definitely getting off fossil fuels. But, you know, everything is linked and chained into that. So that reciprocity that we need to give back to the land, because once it's gone, it'll never be replaced. Sometimes I really fear that because of what we've done to our climate, to try and tell people to start growing their own food, it might be too late for that, because everybody is now growing on these big levels. It's using up a lot of water. Commercial development is using up our water. Here in the Ojai Valley, we now have 24 pools that were dug in this last year. You know, there's this this consuming of material objects, and not enough of thinking about what are the reactions, what is the collateral damage that is happening with what we're doing. The fish, our oak trees, our mountain lions, which are again one of our top animals here. The restoration of bringing back some of those animals, the wolf, the beaver, and making those overpasses that will help protect our four-legged people. We're moving at such a fast pace that we need to slow down. And I think that in itself will help our climate emergency, is step back several steps to relook at what we're doing here. I thank everybody for their words.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone. Well, we're right at 3 o'clock, and I've heard a lot of really great themes of staying in relationship with the natural world and staying in right relationship, and observing and noticing and adapting as we go. So I think that's our time. I know that the Earth Day team has another great thing coming up soon. So I'll bring it back to Vijaya and see if she wants to close.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. This is just wonderful. I'm trying to put my, all right.
Picture.
Yeah. So thank you. And we really learned a lot, and I hope all of our attendees did too. So thank you to CEC. Thank you. And this recording of this forum will be available on our League YouTube site, both in English and in Spanish. Please check out our website, join us as a member, and thank you all for coming, and have a great day on this last day of the Earth Day Festival. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.